My name's Cynthia Gayton. This is a panel of attorneys, and we're going to be talking briefly about licensing. We have on the panel Daniel Payne. We have, Jesse Halfon and David Bogue, or is it Bogue?
Bogue.
Bogue. And I'm Cynthia Gayton. We're all going to do a brief introduction of what it is that we do for those of you. And it's really strange because I was part of the Rare Art Festival back in January of 2018, and it's really strange to see so many people listening at all to any legal issues. So I'm really pleased that you're here. So we're going to do brief introductions. We're going to do a little summary about what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to open it up because we see that there are lots of questions that you all have for attorneys. So we're going to open up for questions. But for purposes of this discussion, we're going to talk about licensing. So, and don't be alarmed if one of us leaves because they're scheduled for a call. So don't be alarmed. Okay, let's start with you, Daniel.
Thanks, Cynthia, and good afternoon, everybody. Daniel Payne from Murphy and McGonigal. We are a financial services boutique law firm, and we got into the crypto space late 2016, early 2017. We've got expertise in securities regulation. There were a lot of token issuers looking for advice on whether or not the token they were issuing may or may not be a security. That's how we got started in the space, and since then we've really focused resources on focusing on this area because we know it is disrupting our traditional clientele, which is the financial services space. So until more recently, probably 2020, we really were just focused on the cryptocurrency side of things and the fungible token side of things. But starting last year, we started seeing more clients in the NFT space. And so we generally are representing the platforms and the exchanges where these things are trading. So we have former SEC attorneys who were in the trading and markets part of the SEC. So that's our focus, and that's what I'll mainly be talking about.
My name is Jesse Halfon. I'm an attorney and consultant for artists, platforms, and DAOs in the NFT and crypto space, focusing mainly on intellectual property and transactional work. But if I represent your DAO, apparently I'm also your securities lawyer, your divorce lawyer, your criminal lawyer, and whatever else you need.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Bogue. I'm the founder of Bogue Law. We are an intellectual property law practice, and we work with a lot of startups, entrepreneurs, established companies on all sorts of intellectual property issues, patents, trademarks, and things like that. And I would say, this is my third NFT.NYC. So a few years ago, we started seeing more and more of this, and you obviously adapt to some of the client demands. But it turns out that it's fascinating legal work because while there's some of the issues have very much stayed the same, it's opened up a lot of new opportunities for how to monetize patents and divide up ownership and things like that. So we're working with a couple of DAOs right now on various patent issues and a couple of other NFT creators. So exciting stuff ahead.
A little bit about what I do. I have a practice in Arlington. I also teach engineers. I've been teaching engineers for about 20 years at the graduate level. And I got involved with this space because I had a steampunk art gallery for about 3 years. And somebody was selling their pieces with Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, this is how I'm going to save money on my transactional costs. But little did I know that was not going to be the case. So I was introduced to Bitcoin. And then a couple years later, as an attorney, I've been a volunteer attorney for artists for decades, and I've always been asked by artists, how can I make money with my art? And so I thought, well, maybe this is going to be helpful, blockchain for musicians in particular, so that their royalties would be distributed properly and that sort of thing. So that's what brought me into this space. So it's been very interesting, real roller coaster. And I think we're at the beginning, and this may not be the end, and it may not end up as NFTs. There might be a future iteration of it, but we're in a good spot now. So let's go on with Daniel. So I had some introductory questions. What is your approach to NFT platforms as you advise them? What are some of the things that you ask them about or are concerned about?
It's a great question because not all platforms have the same question. So the first thing you have to do is figure out, are you dealing with a DAO, a decentralized exchange, a centralized exchange, and then how does the platform work? Are all NFT issuers welcome to post? Is it a platform that is selling their own NFTs that they mint? And there's plenty of IP owners who want to monetize that IP through NFTs, and instead of going to a third-party platform, they want to stand up their own platform where the public can come directly purchase from them, but there's still a separate platform on which the NFTs can be traded. So the first question is always, what are we dealing with here? And then the second thing is, all right, let's run through all the issues that you need to be aware of from the legal perspective. And so the first thing you gotta figure out is, all right, my supply of NFTs. How am I gonna manage my legal risks on that side? So am I dealing with the IP owners, the IP that's in the NFTs? Am I dealing directly with them, or am I dealing with an NFT minting outfit who has a separate relationship with the actual IP owner? And so first you got to know who your counterparty is, and then you've got to have the correct terms of engagement with that counterparty. And so you need to make sure you understand what rights are associated with that NFT that's going to be sold on your platform. Of course, the reason why you need to know that is because you've got to be able to communicate it and make sure it's disclosed clearly to the purchasers. And so we're, as people have been saying all day and all week, we're still in very early stages, despite the carnival atmosphere here. So it feels here like, oh, this is popular, everybody. This is still so early, and the platforms are still underdeveloped when it comes to mature disclosures to purchasers. But there needs to be effective communication to the purchasers of what they are actually purchasing. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but that's a good start.
And it's important for the artists out there and the platforms generally to understand that the licenses that you generally agree to when you try to buy and sell art, you're dealing with the platform first, and they have their own licenses. So now Jesse's going to talk about the licensing for artists, and I wanted to ask about your approach to artists and how they think about licensing, and how do you help them?
Yeah, well, there's no legal roadmap, and there's not going to be one for a long time, right? So the principal issue we're seeing these days is the conflict between traditional intellectual property principles and the Web3 or NFT ethos, right? So in the normal world, as you guys say, the normie world, you have valuable IP, right? Whether it be copyright, trademark, rights of publicity, and someone writes you a check to put it on a t-shirt, a video game, what have you, right? NFTs have basically tried to invert that. They're kind of taking from the open source model of software, from video games like Minecraft. You give away something for free, and what you save on customer acquisition costs and network effects, right? You leverage a business model and you monetize elsewhere, right? And so this was obviously popularized through the Bored Apes Yacht Club, right? You buy one of their NFTs and you get limited rights to derivative works and to commercial rights. And that has been that became so popular, it became basically the standard, not the exception. Bored Apes took off, and then other projects, either because it was more marketable or because end users actually demanded it, that you get some sort of intellectual property rights free with your purchase. And this was taken to its extreme with open source. Many projects are completely open source IP now. Cryptodes, Blitmap. I don't know if there's any hipsters in the audience. Blitmap is like Bored Apes, but for the actual cool kids. Don't at me. And so these are CC0, Creative Commons 0. You don't even have to, not even attribution rights. And what this has kind of created is a spectrum of derivative works. And derivative works are a big part of the NFT ecosystem in a big range. Some of them are fair use. Some of them are complete ripoffs, right? How many apes, toads, degen, jumbles do you see, which are, they're not even close. It's not even close to fair use, but we're not seeing much enforcement. The enforcement that's out there, there's no case law. There's not going to be much case law. It's enforced through DMCA takedowns, tweet somebody, an employee at OpenSea, right? Public shaming. You're more likely to be shamed for enforcing your IP rights than for violating them. And so We have people blatantly flouting IP, securities laws, consumer protection laws, with very little repercussion. And the difference here is that I don't even think, I can guarantee you we're not going to have any new intellectual property laws in this country that are more favorable to crypto, right? There's a 0% chance. I'll give you a 50 to 1 odds for someone who wants a moonshot. Because when we had Web 2.0 and we had the DMCA and we had Section 230, the institutions were on board with that, right? AOL, Facebook, Disney, they needed that. There's no institutions here, or if there are, you guys don't like them. So there's no Mr. Vanderchuck goes to Washington coming back. There's not going to be any new laws. And so we're going to really, I think, and I don't like to say, as principal, I refuse to say the word Wild West anymore, but I can confidently say it will be a clusterfuck for the next few years, because as we onboard more normies, the next generation of people aren't going to share the same ethos as the old ones, right? They're going to be onboarded through, the next 25, 50, 100 million people are going to come on through OpenSea, Facebook, Twitter, your mom's friend. They're not going to share the same values as the core crypto people who, if there's a rug pull, euphemism for criminal fraud, if someone loses their money, then there's a lot of issues there. In this case, when you onboard a larger group of people, right, just when you try to scale anything, whether it's a religion, a political party, et cetera, the new people don't share all the same ethos, so you have to compromise some of your core values. So despite all that, I'm extremely bullish on this, but it's going to be a very bumpy ride.
And it leads to, I'm brought up on intellectual property and how it's supposed to make everybody wealthier and that sort of thing. And as somebody who works in trademark and copyright, I never get as much respect as people in patents, because everyone wants to know if there's a patent on a thing in order to put money behind it. And for those of you who are dealing, because I was working with VCs for a long time, and they wanted to know what the intellectual property was. And all they knew about were patents. And they understood patents, they understood how to leverage patents and make money from patents. So I want to ask, because when I got into this space, it was code is law. And so I was generally not paid attention to at all with anything I had to say, because it's like, well, yeah, you're just saying something, this is an old way of approaching things. So I'm interested in knowing what do you bring to the table with regard to patents that artists as well as platforms could benefit from? What is that? Because I do know that VCs are interested in patents, for sure.
I think that's right. VCs are interested in patents, and when you're talking about patents as they apply to the NFT universe, there's two main issues at play. One is kind of the original issue of, patents are patents, and people get patents on innovations and they get exclusive rights for it. And that's kind of stayed the same. And then there's the second part of it, which is this fantastic new delivery system for patent rights and intellectual property rights that NFTs can provide. So, to your point, not all patents are created equal. VCs may be interested in seeing if there's anything, but sometimes people have a pretty lousy provisional that they've thrown together or done on the cheap, and it's not particularly useful. And as patent attorneys, we're not advocating you should or shouldn't get a patent, but there's lots of issues that come up going in both directions, infringers as well as the innovators. So to take the first point, NFTs, this is groundbreaking stuff. It's interesting, it's affecting the economy and law in all these different ways, but when it comes to patents, things haven't changed that much. Patents are advantageous because they give you exclusive rights. Exclusive rights have economic advantages associated with it. It's that simple. Nike, the last time we were here a couple of years ago, the Nike CryptoKicks patent had just come out, and it was a big deal because it was one of the first ones, and the policy issues aside, they were getting exclusive rights in the NFT world for the first time. And they are certainly not the last. There's a dozen or so issued patents that have already come out. And my unscientific check last night was probably another 100 and something odd published applications, which means there's another couple hundred in the pipeline that haven't published yet. This is all happening. People are getting patents on this stuff, whether you like it or don't like it, and doing due diligence remains really important, making sure that you do your homework and do patent searches and do all that stuff in advance. People aren't going to get the groundbreaking patents, on NFTs generally or anything like that. And, it's going to start to become more limited, but it's still an important issue. And if you're out there, if you're coming up with new ideas, it's valuable to take a look at and see if there's anything there. Because, like I said, you might not, conceptually, not everyone is on board with whether or not you should be getting patents in this space, but people are. Corporations are involved in this. IBM is, drooling over this space. Nike's all over it, so we're seeing it already. And then real quickly on the delivery systems, there's some really exciting stuff that's happening because patents, now you can figure out ways to do fractional ownership and deliver them through NFTs in ways that we've kind of seen with music licensing or want to see with music licensing. There's potential there, and IPWE and Eric Spangenberg and companies like that, they're building whole businesses around this with the hope that this is going to become a groundbreaking way to deliver patent rights easily. Full disclosure, I'm involved in a couple of these OpenSea auctions for clients, but we're auctioning patents packaged in an NFT with information about the infringers attached to it. I mean, it's kind of exciting and novel, but I think you're going to see more and more creative uses for patents using NFTs.
I'm going to break a little, or conflate a couple of the questions I had so each of you can answer these, dealing with liability and enforcement, because I'm of the opinion that in order to deal with all these IP issues, we have to really deal with contracts. And you can't, the difficulty in enforcing contracts, whether it's a smart contract, which is a whole other thing, or any other terms and conditions, I think that might be a way, because practice leads law. If there's something out there in the world that is done well, the law tends to follow, as long as there's some adherence and enforceability and all those kinds of things. The risk to consumers is lowered and all that kind of stuff. So I was wondering, for each of you, what do you think about liability management and enforcement issues that you think remain, that you consider important in your areas of specialty?
It's a great question. So I think platforms need to be especially aware of liability management. And that's because the government authorities that enforce this stuff from the criminal side and from the civil side, they go after the intermediaries. And that's the way they've traditionally policed markets. But in this case, it's even more apparent that's the way they're going to do it, because when you're dealing with crypto transactions, a lot of times you've got anonymous or pseudo-anonymous transactions at the peer-to-peer level. So who's left that they can actually go after? Of course, it's the platform. So it's especially important for them to manage. And a lot of these platforms think, well, the technology is going to solve my liability problems. The technology is going to figure out which NFTs are infringing on IP rights or which ones are fraudulent. The technology is probably not going to be able to save all those, and if it is, it's pretty far off. So there needs to be some kind of liability management now, and you need to figure out what kind of diligence you need to do and what kind of terms and conditions. You talk about the contracts. What kind of terms do you need in your contracts with the supply that is coming in of the NFTs? What kind of representations are they making to you about whether or not they have the rights that are associated with their NFTs? And if they say, hey, this is one of one and I'm never going to make another, well, what are you going to do if you sell that one and they make another? Because the person who purchased it thinks they're getting one of one, and now it turns out it's one of 100, and that's going to probably impact the price. So you need to have, and then you also need to think about liability management with your purchasers. So right now, everybody's got a credit card. We still use credit cards. We're not fully onto cryptocurrencies yet. We all have an expectation, and it's codified to a certain extent in the law, that if there's a fraudulent purchase with your credit card number, you're not responsible for it. And so the credit card companies are actually the ones who deal with that issue, with that fraud. So what's going to happen on the NFT platforms when there are fraudulent purchases or cybersecurity hacks or people buy an NFT, but hey, it's not in my wallet? There's all sorts of things. There needs to be clarity with the people using these platforms as to what kind of liability, who's going to shoulder the liability.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be, like I said, when we onboard more users, there are going to be more creators that actually want to enforce their IP that they spent thousands of hours of their life creating, and they're going to want guarantees that if they fat finger a transaction, they get a refund, whether it's through an institution or not, whether you guys like it or not. And so with any transformative technology, and I think we all agree this is a transformative technology, you have a legal issue, right? You have a cultural shift, right? And then you have a technical or a socio-technical problem. And the tech here is, let's just be honest, suboptimal is generous, right? It just doesn't frickin' work half the time. And so you can put all your copyright licenses, you can embed it, you can have it completely on chain, but how are you going to track that? Because there's not going to be any legal authority, in my opinion, coming in the next 12 to 36 months. There's not going to be any social norms that I think are going to be able to easily resolve this. And so I think we're stuck with intermediaries, which everybody, probably 80% of this room already hates OpenSea in the first place, and you don't want them in this world where we're all supposed to kumbaya and nobody steps on anybody's toes, have OpenSea decide what's the security and what's IP. And so, yeah, I think we're really kind of stuck because you need something like, ASCAP is what does this for music, and everybody here hates ASCAP, but ASCAP kicks butt for creators. So if you don't have an intermediary that's going to help you out, you're going to have to do it yourself.
Yeah, and I'll just say real quickly on the patent side, the technology, it might not protect you. I mean, there's lots of ways to insulate yourself from liability in business, but there are a lot of open questions about some of the structures, like DAOs, for example. It's an open question whether or not that acts like a corporation or they can pierce that for liability to the individual participants.
And we have a minute, so thanks very much for the panel for your answers. I know it was really, you guys could have talked forever, and I would have been interested in hearing your answers for as long as we could. So I really thank you for doing this, and I thank NFT.NYC to have this panel and have us here. If there are any questions, we do have a few kind of seconds. Any questions? Go ahead.
Shout it out.
Or stand up and shout.
I'll repeat it. Go ahead. Are platforms liable for content restrictions on items sold? Time is up. That will be a good panel.
Thanks for playing.
Good panel. Come back for 2022. I'll be in the back. I know some of us are. There's another question in the back. I'll be in the back. I think he has a meeting, but the best thing you can do right now is take a screenshot of that because a lot of you guys are going to need it, I guarantee.
And read the terms and conditions. I do this every month. I do a public service announcement on Twitter. Read the terms and conditions because you'll get some answers there. Back in the back.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Do you see the insurance companies going into space sometime soon?
Do we see the insurance companies going into space anytime soon? 10 seconds or less.
9, 8.
Yeah, if there's money to be made, they'll be in there. That's the
Well
short
said.
answer, and yeah, I do expect they will be in there, but they've got to figure it out first, and that takes a while.
They're in the art space. So, for those of you who are artists, those things there's interest in having those things insured. So it is happening.